So my Patreon friends, this month you all voted and chose a overview of all of my needle felting and embroidery supplies. So I've got my I didn't lock it. Oh no. Okay. We're gonna try that again. Oh dear. Put everything that just fell out back in. Lock it. I've got my main toolbox right here. Whenever I travel, I take this smaller box and then usually one larger box as well. And it is what I fill with what I would consider all of my essential art making supplies. So we are going to go through this box as well as the extras that don't fit into this box and talk about each of them. Today I'm going to start talking about needle felting first. So for needle felting, the most important tool in my opinion is the needle. So this is an 8 needle tool, and I have a couple of different needle tool options. And to get started, I would recommend a 3 needle, an 8 needle, and a single needle as kind of like covering all your bases. So this holds a single needle tool, and this little guide plug comes out. I have to use pliers because it's real sturdy, and it just makes your holding of the fine needle a little bit more comfortable. This one holds 3 needles in a triangle. I'll try and cut in some top-down shots so that way we can look at all of these. I can do that. I have the video editing skills. All right, this is a triangle tip, and it is great for smaller work that's not so small you need a single needle. And then this is an 8 needle tool. The 8 needle tool is great for working things up really quickly. These 3 tools I would consider, if you're gonna really start getting into needle felting, this is what you wanna have. I started with just a single needle, and I worked with only a single needle for probably, oh gosh, way too long, actually, because I started needle felting in 2018. Or 2019? 19. These made my needle felting experience significantly better. Do not go as embarrassingly long as I did, without upgrading your tools to at least a 3 needle. Oh my gosh, I just realized I went like 2 years just doing 1 needle. Oh, that was so silly of me. Don't do that. Don't do that. Get a 3 needle at least. Okay. And so then for needle felting, I do also have these lovely sheep needle tools. I love them. I wouldn't consider them essential because you can get that precision with a single needle felting tool. It just makes some things a little bit faster. That's kind of an upgrade thing. Also, they're adorable. They're a tiny sheep. They're so cute. I absolutely love them, but I feel like they're a bit of an upgrade compared to what I would consider essential. And then next you need something to felt onto. And I use a couple of different felting surfaces. So these are brush mats. This one is new. This one has been used a lot. And you can see how they wear out. The bristles become stiff over time. I find that steaming them actually helps soften them back up a bit. You can also get foam pads. Foam pads are great because you can order them in so many different sizes. You can get really large ones, whereas this is the largest brush pad that I've ever found. And so it works really well when I'm needle felting individual elements, but when I start to scale up my work, like for this kind of stuff, it gets really frustrating because I have to like move the foam pad or the felt pad, brush pad. I have to move the brush pad around behind my work all the time. And that's also how a lot of mine have ended up damaged, is because they've been moved around and like kind of smashed underneath multiple layers of work. And so I do like foam pads, or this is a felted wool mat from the brand is Wool Buddy. And these are also great because this is the biggest size that the Wool Buddy makes, where you can get foam the size of a mattress if you're working that large. I have some larger foam. I have some like 2 foot by 2 foot foam. And so I like it for scaling up. I would say my favorite all-purpose one, depends on your budget because the foam is so affordable. It's so light. It's so easy to ship. I feel like you can get a lot of foam for under $10, whereas this was closer to $20. And you can get like, this one's already bigger in terms of the square size. So it kind of depends. I would say that this is a great beginner piece. And I know some people don't love the brush mat. I am obsessed with my brush mat. I love the crunchy sounds that it makes. I love like ASMR time. I really think it's fantastic and a great multi-purpose tool until you need to start getting larger. And that's where foam or wool mats come into play. I also believe this is a bit more expensive. So I would say start with the foam and see how you feel about it and just kind of get an idea of it before you invest in something a little bit more durable. The other thing about the foam to keep in mind is that it can wear out. If you're a heavy-handed felter like I am, you can get like worn down spots. So you need to continually move your work around, which is the same on this. The wool felting mat, I just felt more wool into the funny holes that I make, and that works really great. So we've got tools And those are really all you need as far as tools. You need needles and you need some kind of mat so you don't ruin your table. And then the next part that's really quite important is the wool. I use both Corriedale and Merino roving in my work. So Merino is a bit longer of a fiber staple length. So this is Merino. It's got a bit longer. It's kind of like if you've seen arm knitting blankets, that's likely to be some kind of Merino blend. So the staple length is just how long the fiber is. This is so wonderful for finishing details, small work, things like that. And I always have some Merino on hand. And then the other wool that I like a lot is Corriedale. Corriedale is a shorter fiber and a bit kind of fluffier. It works out more quickly, in my opinion, than Merino. And it felts down really tightly. And I use it for a lot of like the base construction that I do. So if I'm starting to build up a form, I go in with Corriedale first and then add in Merino for detail after. But if I'm doing something small, I might do the whole thing in Merino. So Corriedale and Merino are both wonderful, wonderful fibers to work with. I would say if you're just getting started, look for Corriedale because it does felt faster. And it's a shorter staple length and it's a bit more crimpy, coily, kinky. And so it felts up a little bit tighter. Felting is created when the wool fibers agitate and bind together. And so since this already has a bit of a texture to it, it binds up faster. Whereas the Merino is nice and smooth. And like when I do work, I don't know if you can tell on here, but there are sharp lines in there. Merino is so fantastic for that. So those are the two fibers that I would highly recommend the most. And you might develop different preferences. It's so great to start to kind of experiment and get a feel for what you like. Okay, I've just made a little pile in front of me. The other thing that I felt with a lot that I absolutely love for adding structure is something called pre-felt. So this is just a tiny little rectangle of pre-felt. It's not the same as felt because it's only been lightly felted. And so you can still pull it apart. It still has some texture to it, but it has already been lightly felted, which is why it's called pre-felt, and you can add elements onto it really easily and you can use it as a structure. And I find that really helpful when I'm doing larger forms purely felted. It's nice to have a bit of a head start and a bit of structure going a long way. I would say much like the sheep tool is an upgrade, adding pre-felts into your work is an upgrade, especially because if you're doing three-dimensional forms like circles and cylinders and stuff like that, pre-felt may not be right. But if you're doing the more wool painting style, pre-felting can go a long way. So we're going to add that into our like upgrade pick pile. Also, I'm hoping that this will come out the same time as the video. I'm working on typing all of this up with hyperlinks for all of you. So that way you can just refer back to it, save that document, and you can listen to me explain why I like these things, but also you can just click and find these things for yourself. I do a lot of tube barnacles, which I'm sure you've seen the videos of them before. Let's do a larger one so you can actually see it on camera. These guys with the open center, I do a lot of those, and for those I use a wide variety of random pipes and tubes and crochet hooks, and I've heard people using markers and pens and all sorts of things. If it's cylindrical shaped, you can use it to mold your felting around, but also if it's sturdy and it's going to hold up, and you're going to be able to remove it from that, you can use so many different things as molds, right? Like you could do a triangle or something like that. You just need to have a way out so you don't have to cut your felting open to get it off. So that's all my felting. So, no, it's not. No, it's not. No, it's not. I laid them all out in front of me so I wouldn't forget anything. Oh, future Amy, I hope you do okay editing this. You need something to felt on. So I felt on wool felt. The number of times I've said felt in this video, I just hope that my automatic captioning gets all my felt usages correct. So I felt onto wool felt as my background, and I often put quilter's cotton underneath to layer it, to double it up for stability, especially if I'm going to be doing embroidery or beadwork or anything else on top of it. I find that because felt is non-woven, the stability of the quilter's cotton really helps when you're going to do those extra embellishments. If I'm doing a fully felted piece, I may not reinforce it at the back with quilter's cotton because it doesn't have those same issues, but I find when you're putting a needle and thread through and pulling, it's nice to have the stability of the weave to hold everything in place, and it makes it a lot easier to frame afterwards or to manipulate if you're going to take it off the hoop and do anything with it. So quilter's cotton and felt, and those transfer over very nicely to my embroidery supplies. So a good embroidery hoop is essential. I love hardwood hoops. Frank A. Edmonds makes the best hoops in my opinion, as does the brand Nerge. Frank A. Edmonds and Nerge are both like my go-to hoop suppliers. Nerge makes a lot larger hoops if you want to make bigger work. They have fantastic quality quilting hoops, whereas the smaller ones from Frank A. Edmonds, they're hardwood, they're beautiful quality, highly recommend. They're what I put in all my kits. So when I'm stretching a hoop to do any kind of work, whether it's felting or embroidery or both, I put the quilter's cotton down first, the felt on top, and I stretch it within one of these hoops. And that is where I get what I was saying about the extra stability from the quilter's cotton, because the felt is already being stretched. And like I was saying earlier, it's non-woven, which means that when you stretch it, it doesn't necessarily want to go back. Whereas woven fabric wants to go back into its original position. So the woven fabric is kind of holding down the fort behind the felt. And that helps so much for structural integrity. A good solid wood embroidery hoop, you want to look for something that doesn't have gaps between, and it doesn't have any sort of like odd twisting or knots or anything like that. The inner ring needs to be flush with the outer ring, and you want it to actually be a circle. I have found some that are intended to be a circle and are like the wonkiest ellipses circle. I don't even know what. That's not going to give you a good even tension throughout, and you want to stretch your fabric pretty tight into the hoop. The other thing that is obviously essential for embroidery work is needles. I will have to put on screen which size needle that I use because I buy them by the thousand. But I buy John James brand needles, and I work with all 6 strands of embroidery floss all the time. I tend to work a bit larger. I want that scale of detail. And so the John James embroidery needles in their largest eye size is what I go for every time. And then I also do have yarn needles if I'm going to work with yarn, and those have a much larger eye as well. And it allows you to pass thin or even medium-sized yarn through them, but it still is sharp, so will puncture the fabric, unlike a true yarn needle that you might use to weave your ends in. It's going to have a blunted needle, and we need something to get through our multiple layers of fabric. So yarn needles are great for that. And then sharp, portable scissors, essential for snipping threads, especially because you want a clean edge if you're going to be threading your needle. I love the single piece metal needle threaders as a way to make threading your needle more approachable and accessible. At this point in my embroidery arts life, I don't use those because I can thread a needle so quickly as long as it has a clean, sharp edge. That's really, really important. And so I always like to make sure that I have a good, sharp pair of embroidery snips on hand, because that gives me the clean edge, and then I can felt or thread my needle really quickly. I primarily use DMC embroidery floss because it is the most widely available, easily accessible, and the colors are consistent with the numbers, and it just has so many. However, I also really love Sublime floss. I've put that in my kits a lot of times. It has a great range of colors too. It's beautiful floss. And so those are my 2 go-tos when it comes to embroidery floss. I haven't really experimented with other brands. I know some people love Anchor floss. I just personally haven't used it, so I can't really speak to that. And then I do use beads often in my embroidery work, and I get size 6 seed beads, like glass seed beads, because I can sew them with that large embroidery needle that I'm already using and not have to downsize to a beading needle, which I find so helpful. And you can get size 6 glass seed beads at Michael's just in their beading section, but I primarily get my beads from Fire Mountain Gems, and I buy them like in comical bulk qualities because of what I do. I've misplaced my beads. Please hold. I like to organize them by color and keep them sorted into their own little section. I've also gotten other kinds of beads in other styles, and I've just gotten glass beads and ceramic beads from Etsy, kind of one-offs from random shops, and I don't have a go-to non-seed bead supplier that I can really say, yes, absolutely, this is the one that I would send everybody to. And then I also do use sequins, and my favorite place to get sequins is a shop called Savannah Sequins on Etsy. They are always shipping fast, great quality, and I absolutely love them. And then I do try and store all of my work in little bins. I just have used food bins. Like, you can put leftovers in these. They were extremely affordable, and I sort all my stuff by color. So that way I know what I have, and I have like unfinished elements in one bin and finished elements in another bin, and that keeps me really organized. I also will say one of the things that I would put as an essential part of my art process is good light. So I have LEDs on the ceiling, and I have a ring light. And I have great natural lighting here. And if you don't have good light, it's going to be a lot harder to make good color decisions. So I would definitely recommend looking at just a small daylight bulb, even if that's what you can do, and do like a task lamp, because that's going to help so much because you can see your colors more accurately. It will help manage your eye fatigue and you'll be able to choose your colors more easily. So good light is really crucial. And then I feel like in the bit of the bonus round of kind of other random stuff that I use, I do use tweezers if I'm placing small items and my fingers are too big. I love a good pair of tweezers. These are just like Target tweezers. I also have a little task timer that beeps when the timer is up to make sure that I don't just completely zone out and felt for 12 hours and never see the light of day. And also to make sure that I give myself breaks for my wrists and my shoulders and my elbows and my entire body, because felting and any sort of art where you're hunched can be really hard on your body. So just taking good breaks is really essential as well. I think that covers all of my supplies that I would deem absolutely essential to get started. I do work with yarn sometimes, and I love a good yarn. I tend to, if I'm sewing with yarn, I use fingering or sock weight yarn, but if I'm adding yarn on, I go for a medium to bulky weight yarn. So a worsted, bulky, chunky, something like that to give it texture. And I do have some favorite suppliers for those. Malabrigo makes beautiful hand-dyed yarn, and so does Nebroma Studio has felted wool yarn that adds so much gorgeous texture, so I'll include them as well. And those are all kind of bonus round things that I would say. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I made a list. Sat down for this and made a list and thought it all through, and I just feel like I might be forgetting something. But it's okay. I'll make sure to add all of my thoughts and all of these links into like a Google PDF or something like that that you can download. Future Amy will let you know. This Amy doesn't know. So I think that covers it, and I should wrap it up. And my poor little brain has left the building. That covers all of my favorite tools for needle felting and embroidery, and what I would consider the basics and the essential tools to get started with your practice. I would love it if you would let me know if you have any questions in the comments of this post, or shoot me an email or a message through the Patreon platform, and check back in just a few days to vote on what our next month's tutorial should be. This year, I am working on increasing the amount of both video and written content that I'm sharing here on this platform, especially in the educational realm and in the behind the scenes process of my artwork. So please let me know if there's a specific kind of content that you would like to see more of, and I hope you have a wonderful day.